I think we can all agree that there is a lot that Chat-GPT doesn't do too well, right? At least in the SAP world. It often messes up when it comes to standard function modules, field and table names, standard classes, and even pure ABAP syntax. But did you know that we can actually influence the results that Chat-GPT generates? Yeah, you've heard that right. The messages that you send it within the same session are remembered and interpreted, and they affect future results. So, in other words, we train the model so that it provides higher quality and more suitable results. But how can this help us with generating ABAP code? Well, you can tell it about company-specific guidelines, for example. One of the most common development guidelines that companies have is naming conventions. If you remember our last episode, we asked Chat-GPT to generate an interface and classes for us. If we hadn't told GPT what we want the objects to be called, it would have probably come up with something like Z-test-class or just Z-class. Far from perfect, especially in bigger organizations that care about naming conventions. But if we had taught Chat-GPT what we expect the names to be, it would save us having to change all the names later on. Here's how we could do it. Remember, Chat-GPT will remember the input you'd given it within a single session. If you open a new session, you will need to feed it with the training prompt again. So let's start by giving it clear guidelines. 4 sample requirements to start with. Namespace, class naming convention, interface naming convention, and method naming convention. As we can see, Chat-GPT confirms that it understood the requirement and even provided a sample snippet which looks good at first glance. Next, without mentioning anything about the desired naming convention, I copied and pasted the same prompt that I used in the last episode. This time, the result is different. It handled the naming conventions really like a pro. Now, similarly to last week, I asked it to generate the class for handling error messages. If you look closely, the naming conventions are followed, and it even figured out the full name of the class based on my one-line description of what I want. Not bad, is it? 2 minutes of effort in training at the start of the session can save us time in the long run. Here's a tip for you. Save your training prompt and make sure you always start a new session with it. Have you ever tried teaching Chat-GPT anything? I'd love to know your experience with it. Make sure you share it in the comments. And above all, don't forget about data privacy. Whatever you paste into the chat window will be stored on the OpenAI servers. Make sure you check out episode 2 of this series if you want to know more about data privacy as a topic. I hope you enjoyed this new structure of short tips on Chat-GPT. Thanks for watching and see you again next week.